I'm Jonathan Tomkin from the University of Illinois. This is an image of St. Matthew's Island, which is in the Bering Sea, which is off the coast of Alaska. In this lecture, we're going to be considering if human beings are more like reindeer or cells. We better hope we're more like cells. In 1944, 29 reindeer were introduced to the island, which previously only had foxes and voles as resident mammals. Can you guess what happened to the number of reindeer on the island? At first, the population exploded. The grey numbers are the data on which the red line is based. In 1963-64, there was a very harsh winter. Coincident with that, there was an enormous decline in the number of reindeer. The reindeer had eaten all of the fodder available on the island, so mass starvation followed. The population plummeted from around 6,000 to just 42. By the 1980s, no reindeer were left. They never recovered from this overexploitation era. Clearly, we don't want to be like the reindeer, but not everything has this reindeer growth curve. Cells grown in isolation on a petri dish with a finite food source don't grow exponentially, because as their numbers increase, the amount of food available decreases relative to their numbers, and so their growth rate slows. These cell cultures both grew to a maximum size at a slowing rate as they approached this maximum population, this sustainable path. And so, using these two as examples, ecologists would talk about there being different types of population growth curves. One would be a J-shaped growth curve, like we saw for the reindeer. The other shape would be more like an S-shape. And as you can see, they're called J-shape and S-shape because they're similar to the way the letters are written. S-shaped growth curves are for systems that match the resources available. So they might grow quickly in the beginning, but growth slows down as the carrying capacity, the amount of food available in the case of, say, the reindeer on the island, or the amount of food for the cells in the petri dish, are exhausted. Imagine grass on a field, for example. There's only a finite amount of sunlight. So even if there is no predators for grass, we have no grazing, there are no reindeer in this case, if we plant some grass in one corner, it will spread and grow, but it won't grow beyond a certain amount. It won't grow beyond the area that can be supported by the sunlight. This maximum population is known as the carrying capacity. So although the grass might grow quickly in the beginning, its growth will slow as it runs out of fresh open land to colonise. Other organisms, like the reindeer on the island, can grow past this carrying capacity, at least for a short while. They do this by unsustainably using up resources. So they don't save some fodder for the next season, they eat everything that is available. Because this system is not in balance, it eventually crashes. You cannot have a population that is beyond the carrying capacity indefinitely. Eventually it has to go back down or below the carrying capacity. Given that a system has a carrying capacity, and for the purposes of our discussion, S-shaped growth might be considered sustainable, whereas J-shaped growth is clearly unsustainable. The problem for us, if we're thinking about is our growth curve sustainable, is that the two curves can look very similar for a very long time. So we might consider asking ourselves the question, is human society more like the reindeer or more like the cells in the petri dish? Some argue that we're already past the carrying capacity, so we're already destined for a big drop because we're on a J-curve, population growth or use growth or energy growth curve. This means we're heading for a crash. And there's a lot of books to this effect. Some of them describe J-shaped crashes of human societies in the past, and I've got an example of that of collapse here, while there's lots of fiction books that think about the future in terms of an inevitable collapse. For example, Margaret Atwood's Oryx and Crake. So many arguments about sustainability actually boil down to this very simple question. Is our use of a particular resource, perhaps an energy resource, a food resource, land, or indeed in this picture our entire population, is it following a J curve or is it following an S curve? It's reasonable to think that we're near some kind of carrying capacity because around 38% of the world's land is currently already used for agricultural production. So it's not like that we are nowhere near any theoretical carrying capacity. We could be very close to it. So this means that no matter how you look at sustainability, population is very important, because population is showing a growth curve, as we can see here, that is compatible with a J-curve hypothesis. And as we know, if we have a J-curve hypothesis, and it turns out to be true, we're headed for a big crash. We're unsustainable. In the next lecture, I'm going to look at what previous thinkers have described when they saw this as our vision of the future.
Produced by OCE Atlas Digital Media at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign.